Hi friends, welcome back to A Scrappy Little Joy. I'm Pam, and today is the Block 3 release for our Weekly Whim project. You'll want to check down in the bottom in the description for the download for our cutting instructions for our block today. Our block today is called a Hopeful Maple, and it is a little bit of a spin on the traditional maple star block. It's a 12-inch block today, so that's a little bit of a change up from block 1 and block 2, which were both 9-inch blocks. So we're going to put that right there. And if you remember, here is our block 1, and here is our block 2, and block 3 looks like this. So we are going to go ahead and get started. A couple of things that I wanted to share. Now you remember that we've got these fabrics in our box from block 1 and from block 2, and we've got one fabric from block 1 that's in block 2. Block 3 has one of the fabrics from block 1, and then this is from block 2, and then we've got 5 additional fabrics. So we've got 7 whole fabrics in this block, which is going to give us a nice infusion opportunity for our box, for our coming for more fabrics for our coming blocks, our next blocks, our subsequent blocks. Okay, a couple of things that we're going to start with. I'm just going to go ahead and tuck these in, but I'm going to need this piece. I'm going to tuck these into our box right now. And then a couple of things. So you'll remember that last week we did we did some 4 at a time flying geese, and a couple of you remarked at a Scrappy Little Joy Facebook group that you were still having a little bit of trouble with getting those flying geese, trimming those flying geese so that you had enough room. And when all was said and done, and you had enough to make it an accurate cut size. And so I have, if you note, I have pulled in flying geese units into this block as well, because I've spent a little bit of time this week. I've gone on a quest, and I've made all kinds of little flying geese friends. Aren't they cute? And so what I've done is to try and find a regular formula to help me figure out how to make the block pieces big enough but not too big in order for us to have an ability to accurately trim. So these are going to be for another fun project. I don't know what I'm going to do with those, but those can stay there. So what you have here in your cutting instructions is your block, your unit A, fabric A, sorry, is going to be 5.5 inches. And your fabric B, if you'll go ahead and draw a diagonal line on all of those as well as we get started, those are going to be 3 1/8 inch. Now, for those of you who just really feel totally fine with their flying geese in terms of your ability to be accurate, and you don't feel like you want it to be oversized, I think I wrote it down. Where did I put it? Right here. So you're going to want to trim yours. You're going to want to cut your fabric A to 5 1/4 and your fabric B to 2 7/8. But go ahead and put that diagonal line on the back. And just like last week, we are going to go ahead. I'm going to need those in a bit. We're also going to talk, before I forget, at the end of this, let's take a look at our fabric G. I've made my fabric G and here's my finished block. I've done a little fussy cut here, and I have come up with a very easy way. Let's say, for instance, our fabric G unit is 4.5 inches. Let's say, for instance, you don't have a 4.5 inch square for your ability to fussy cut a shape so it stands right in the middle. I've got a trick for you so that you can use any size acrylic ruler as long as it's bigger than 4.5 inches. And I'm going to teach you a trick on how we can make our little fussy cut shape, whatever it is, right in the middle, right smack in the middle. So stay tuned for that a little bit down the pike. So we're going to start with our fabric A and our fabric B. And just like last week, we're going to line up our fabric B right sides together with our diagonal line drawn this way. And we're going to layer these on top of each other. And I am going to pin this because, as you remember, this little block can slip a little bit. I'm not always the queen of pinning, but I do like to pin when I feel like I might have something that'll slip a little bit. And as you remember, I am pinning on the far sides here so that my presser foot is not going to run into these pins at all, and I'm not going to have to pull them out either. So there is that. Also, leaders and enders. If you missed my leaders and enders, I'm going to take my shoes off as I do. If you missed my leaders and enders post, have a look at that, because many of you gave me some tips and suggestions and told me I really need to be using leaders and enders. Well, long story short, I am hooked. And so have a look at that video, and also the supplemental video that talks about block 3 and the leaders and the enders, and look how cute my little blocks are. So you'll learn about that, and those are going to be what I'm working toward today for my leaders and enders, and I already have one in there. So I'm going to sew on a scant quarter of an inch if you can. So that's just a little bit less than a quarter of an inch on each side of that line that we have drawn. So we'll go ahead and do that. And I've been happy to be spending so much time with Jane lately. We have not had a lot of time in recent years together. I've been sewing with my fancier machine. But it's nice to be with Jane. She's doing really great. It just occurred to me, though, I probably want to make sure that I am remembering to oil her and do all the lubrication and stuff, because my other machine tells me when I need to do that. Jane does not. Okay, so now I'm going to sew on that other side of that line a scant quarter of an inch. And believe me, I have not forgotten all of you friends who are really reaching for a little bit more information on understanding all the ins and outs, the hows and the whens and the whys of scant quarter of an inch. And I'm working on a little video of that. And that is detailed in that little update that I produced, that I shared yesterday as well. And I'm saying yesterday, that's actually today for me, because today is Tuesday for me, but it's Wednesday for you. Okay, so we now have our start of our little guy. Where's my favorite ruler? Right there. And we're going to just cut right on that diagonal line so that we will have 2 of our favorite little heart-shaped units. Aren't they so cute? I love them so much. Look at that. And we're going to press toward those triangles, okay? Okay, you friends can go right there. One of these days, I will do what I can to get a pressing camera as well, so that you're able to see kind of how I press. Because I've got some kind of just a process of how I do that as well. Okay, now we've got our 2 little heart pieces, and we're going to take the other 2 fabric B units, and we're going to put those right in place so that that diagonal line goes right this way and in between those 2 little points, those 2 little triangles. So I'll do that as well. And then we're going to go ahead and do the same as we did, a scant quarter of an inch on both sides of that little triangle. One of the other reasons for using a scant quarter of an inch, or a little bit smaller than a quarter of an inch, is that's going to give us just a little bit more room in our for our trimming. And so that's kind of, anytime we can give ourselves that is better. I'm still getting the hang of the leaders and enders, friends. It's a process, isn't it, of learning to just always tuck that little piece of fabric in there, but I'm so excited at the prospect of the new projects that are just going to become as I am growing my little projects, all the little things that I'm doing with Jane, making with Jane and all of you. Oh, let me get another one in there. Okay, so we're just going to snip these apart, and we are going to take our pins out, and we're going to cut right on that diagonal line so that we've got 4 flying geese units. And just like with our other triangle, we're going to want to make sure that we are pressing toward that triangle for all of these units. And then we can come back and we'll talk about, you know, there are flying geese rulers for trimming. And do I find them useful? Absolutely, I do. I have several of them. I have the block lock ones like this. And while I love them and they are perfect, this would be perfect for this unit right here. I tend to get a little bit in the habit of just always using some of my favorite tools. And this is my favorite, one of my favorite tools that I use almost every day. I'm drawing lines with this baby. I'm cutting diagonal. It's just a really perfect size. This is the Creative Grids Itty Bitty 8s rectangle. And again, I'm just telling you, it's a tool that I love, and it works great for this as well. And so you will see me use this often. So when we want to create, in this case, we need a 2.5 by 4.5 inch flying geese unit. I don't know what I want to call them today. Maybe I'll call them little goose units because there's 1, 2, 3, 4 of them. Okay, so we need, we're always going to start at this top, at this point, because we want to give ourselves the best chance for our little point to show. So if we start on this other side, we may have made it too short already, and then we don't give ourselves enough room to sew here. So we want our ruler to be 1/4 of an inch from that point, okay? As best we can, we want to kind of square it up. So I'm going to just trim that off, okay? And I've got 1/4 of an inch right there. So now I'm going to turn this around, and I'm going to trim the bottom 2.5 inches from that top cut. So lickety split, that side is done. Now, just like we did last week, we know that this needs to be 4.5 inches. So we are going to take a look and find our 2.5 inch mark, or 2.25 inch mark, and we are going to line that 2.25 inch mark right at the point. Okay, and this is nice and straight right along that top cut edge because we've already cut that. We know it's straight. All right, so we're lined up nice and square, and we're going to take that one off, and then now we need to be 4.5 inches from this cut line, or yes, 2.25 inches from here, but it's just as easy to just go over here at 4.5. Okay, and look, there's our perfect little flying goose unit. Okay, so there's that one. Let's just do 3 more real quick. 1/4 of an inch from that point, 2.5 inches from that top, 2.25 inches from the one side. And I know, friends, most of you maybe are looking at me a little bit crooked and saying, isn't she using the wrong hand there? I am a lefty, so I am always going to start on my left side of anything, but you feel free to start on whichever side is most comfortable for you. There we go. Okay, so there is another one. 1/4 of an inch from this top nice and straight across. And again, you're doing your best to really just line up as comfortably as you can with this edge. This is not a perfectly cut seam, but it should be pretty well straight. Okay, so there is that one. Let's go 2.5 inches from that edge. 2.25 inches from the point. And 4.5 inches from that cut side. I hope that's making sense to everybody. Okay, let's do one more, and then we will be ready to assemble our fabric fabric E and F together. They are going to be friends in this block. Okay. So now we are just going to go 4.5 inches from that side. Ta-da! They're all done. Okay, so let's just, while we are looking at everything as it is, let's look at our illustration. Let's just lay this all out so that we can start to envision where we're going to place these fabrics, and then we can start to talk about how we're going to press them once we sew them together. So we know that this little guy goes in the middle. We're going to start with that one in just 1 second, so I don't forget to teach you that really important tip that we talked about. Okay, so we know that our flying geese units go to the outside, okay, and our fabric D units go right next to our center. And our fabric E units go on the outside, all 4 sides. Whoops, I forgot to put that little guy where he goes. And this goes here, and this goes here. And then we have our fabric F, and that goes to the inside, right next to our fabric D rectangles. The last piece we have is our fabric C unit. Let me just scooch this back. I want to make sure that you can see everything as we go along. So our fabric C units are going in these corners. Okay, let's talk for a minute about this little fussy cut guy, okay? So remember I said we are going to figure out how to do this without needing an exact 4.5 inch ruler. I have a 6 inch ruler here, and it's one of my favorite rulers that I use often. So if I don't have a 4.5 inch ruler, but I want to make a nice fussy cut, remember I said I was going to save this little piece of fabric out? There's a little fussy cut flower right in the middle for us. Let's take a look at how we can use a little square piece of fabric. I want you to cut whether it's a piece of cardstock or paper or whatever, a 4.5 inch square piece of paper. And then I want you to draw a diagonal line in both directions. Then I want you to get your ruler, whatever ruler that is, and I want you to put it in one corner so that you can see that it lines up at 4.5 inches. And we're going to be brave about something here. Ready? We're going to use a Sharpie. Don't worry. It's not going to be permanent, and I'll show you how to take it off. I'm going to put a dot right in the center where those points come together for that line, those 2 diagonal lines. Then just for good measure, I might just go like this, and I might just go like this and this. So I'm real clear where that 4.5 inch square is on my ruler. And then we don't need our little template anymore. We just then want to take our little dot and place it right in the center of our whatever we want to fussy cut. And see, it's right there in the center. So I'm going to trim on both sides here. Move my fingers. Nobody needs to go to the emergency room today. And then I'm going to spin this around. Okay, and I'm going to turn my ruler this way. And I'm going to pop that little dot right in the center again. Whoopsie, do I want it that way? Let me see. I got to remember. Maybe it goes this way. I guess it goes this way. Yep. That goes right in the center again. And then we've got this lined up with the edge. And look, now I'm going to go like this. I'm going to trim this side, and I'm going to trim this side. Look at me do that with my right hand. Yikes. Okay. Look at that. And there is our little fussy cut flower. Also, pay attention to the fact that I have so many colors in this fabric. And what I really especially wanted was to pull in this yellow and this red, because guess what happens? Later down the pike, I can pull some reds and some yellows into this quilt, and I'm into one of my blocks, and I'm going to be able to go, oh, yep, see, it all goes together. That's about the building one block at a time, so that we give ourselves that extra flexibility. Okay, so that is our spare square. Now we're going to look at assembling this. We need to assemble our flying geese units to our fabric D rectangles and our fabric E to our fabric F. So we're going to chain stitch those all together right now. I'm going to start with E and F. I'll do all of those, and we'll get those sewn together. And then what we'll do as we go along here, once we get these all sewn together, we're not going to press them until we've got them all laid out. And we can then ask ourselves how it is going to be most conveniently pressed so that each one of these pieces lays the most comfortably against another piece. Nesting if possible. Nesting if necessary. Okay, so there are all of my fabrics E and F. Now I'm going to move to my flying geese units. And remember, just like we did last week, we want to make sure to put that piece unit on top, the flying geese unit, flying goose unit on top, so that we can see that little point right here. If we need to pin, we certainly can. I'm not going to pin today, but you can pin, and that is just fine. Okay, so now I want to make sure that I am sewing 1/4 inch that line from that edge, and I want my needle to go when I get to this point, and I want to take it slow. I don't have to race here. I am going to make sure that my needle goes into my fabric as close to that point on that side of the point, not on the inside of the point, not on the goose part of the point, right? We want it on the outside of the point, or preferably, ideally, just at the point. That way, we're not going to lose that little point in our block. And that's the ideal, that's the goal. Is it necessary that it's perfect? No. But perfection is the beacon. The joy is in the journey. That's my favorite thing to think about, my favorite way to see it. We're doing our best, we're striving, but it doesn't have to be perfect. Okay. Right against that point. And one more. Okay, I might get one more little ender here. There we go. Okay, need our snippers. Okay, now we'll just trim all these little beauties apart. Okay, so let's put everything where it lives, and then we'll decide how we're going to press. Because remember, what we're really looking at is the bulkiness of the seams in how we press them. Now that one goes outside, doesn't it? Okay. Fabric B goes next to our pretty little fussy cut center. And again, you don't have to fussy cut that center if you don't feel like it. If you have a simpler print there, it's just an idea, and it's just an opportunity for you to learn a little bit about how you might like to do it if you want to do it. Okay, we know that this is where our bulkiest seam is in this whole piece, right here at this point. So the best thing we can do is to press away from the flying goose bit. So I'm going to just do that. I'll press away, and then you be thinking as you're pressing away which direction we are going to want to start to consider pressing our fabric A-B units. Because that is a little bit of when we have the conversation about always press to the dark side. In the case of the way my block is set up, my fabrics are set up, pressing to the dark side is not going to be the best idea. Because this seam allowance is pressed this way, I need these seam allowances to press that way, which means I'm going to be pressing toward the light in this case. It's just the way it is. But if I am strictly adhering to the press to the dark side rule, then I'm going to run into a wrestling match in my mind there. Nobody wants that. Just be flexible. Switch it up. I'm convinced that nobody's looking at my quilts, even long after I'm gone, to say, wow, I can really see those seam allowances through that light fabric. I don't know if that's good. So I doubt that's a thing. Okay, now what we want to be doing is let's create these units. So we'll then decide how we want to press these. So we're just going to create our, what would be our 4 square units by sewing our EF units to our C unit. I generally try, if I can, to have the pieced parts on top if possible, just because, like, otherwise sometimes my little seam allowances flip and go the other way if I don't see them, if they're on the bottom. So ideally, that's what I like to do. Is it critical? It isn't. It just makes it easier if you train your brain to do that and go in that direction. Okay, one more. Okay, so let's trim these apart. Now, as we consider how we want to press these, we want to be thinking about the top and the bottom unit and which direction those move in. So let's get these where they need to live. I have a couple of little directional type fabrics here that I think no, that's got to go that way, and that's got to go that way. And that's, oh no, wait, yeah, and that goes that way. Yeah. And this, how am I doing this? Am I doing this right, friends? This doesn't go that way. This goes to the outside, and this goes to the outside. Outside, 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 outside. Okay. So now, the way we press these is going to be dependent upon what they're going to join up with, which is right here. Remember, that's going toward this way, toward the blue, or toward the fabric D. So that means this unit needs to go, these units all need to be pressed toward the C so that they'll properly nest with their friend in the middle. So I'm going to comfortably press those this way toward the C rectangle. Okay, now in this case, like our last block, we're going to have 3 columns to press in. We're going to sew this one together, then this one together. So let's do our best. If you would like to pin here using your little fork pins, if you like to use your fork pins, we touched on fork pins, I think, in block 1, maybe block 2 as well. I'm not going to pin today. This is a little bit of a larger, because this is a 12-inch block, there's a little more involved in this. And I want to make sure that I'm being a good steward of your time in making sure that I am moving along with purpose. So that is that one. I'm getting all kinds of little leaders and enders here. And let's put that guy there. See, I'm just going to sandwich it right up, and look, they just nest right up nicely together. So as we go along, what we're going to start to see is in the varying sizes of the blocks we make, we're going to say, wow, we've got all of this size or this size or this size. What other ones? Now let's join this one. What other size blocks do we want to start to incorporate in this quilt so that we can start to line blocks up next to one another and make a little puzzle, a little sampler quilt puzzle. And you're starting to see, as we vary our sizes, that we can do that. Okay. So I'm seeing in our future that we need to be thinking about maybe some 6-inch blocks. Those are nice little fillers. I have to be careful because I could just make 6-inch blocks all the days. I love me some little blocks. So some little 6-inch blocks variations we can do for filling in spaces. Maybe an 18-inch block, a nice big block, which has nice larger pieces, which is always kind of fun to do. Allows you to maybe make a nice, let's do this side, make a nice, like a big floral print if you want, or a larger scale print. It's fun for those big blocks. So I'll be thinking about that as I start to put together our coming blocks. Unit. Look at all of my little guys. They are building up. I'm really surprised at this, guys. I had not fully appreciated the whole concept of a whole nother project. I do have an idea for what I can make as well. So as we get moving a little bit further, it's not going to be a giant quilt. That's a hint. But it will be a useful project. Okay. So now what we want to do, again, is to make our seam allowances as flat as possible. So the best way to press them, as I see it, it wouldn't matter which way you press, because this is a flat seam, this is a flat seam, there's nothing joining here. But there's a fold here, or I should say a seam here and a seam here. So let's let this Flying Goose unit lay nice and flat in there, and we're going to press our side units to the outsides, okay? That way we can press our center unit to the inside, and they will nest comfortably with their outside friends. I should say the center will nest comfortably with its outside friends. There's that one. And to the outside. Okay. This one goes here, this one goes here. And again, always perfectly reasonable for you to pin here. What I tend to like to do is I like to loosely line it up, and I start right there at that point, and I make sure I've got that started, And then as I go along, I can just wiggle in here. One of our friends also on in one of my posts, or in one of the comments, suggested that she'd really like to see the sewing process, like a view of my sewing. And I don't disagree. I love that idea, and we're working on it, if that makes any sense. Mr. Woods does all of the editing, and he sets up all the cameras and all that good stuff. And I just sit here and do the fun stuff. But anyway, so he is working on that component, and we'll see if we can't get that going here in the near future as well, so that you're able to a little bit better see. I have a simple way of showing you how I'm sewing here, but it doesn't work for this setup when we're doing a big block. Okay, there is that. And then so we know we're sewing it to the right side. So now, once we get this seam together, we're going to have to decide how we want these seam allowances to press. And sometimes, I think for the first, maybe even the second one, I pressed those two seams open, which is perfectly reasonable to do. The other option, since I've made this block already, I know how I pressed it, is that I looked at, once I finished it, I looked at the way it seemed to want to lay, right? So if I look at the back of this, it seems to want to lay toward the middle. So I would say, let's let it. I'm going to press toward the center on this one. But you get to press whichever direction you think your fabrics, your block works most comfortably in this case. You could press outward or you could press open if your little block wants to lay that way. Okay, look. I see that a couple of my points are not totally lining up here. And you know what? I'm good with that because I chose not to pin today. Okay, here's our little block 3. Isn't it wonderful? Isn't it fun? I hope you are loving your block. Next week, we'll be back here with block 4. I haven't decided whether it's going to be a 6-inch block or an 18-inch block or maybe some more 9-inch blocks, but whatever I choose, whatever I pull together, I'm looking forward to being back here with you with my box of fabrics and your box of fabrics, building another block here in the Weekly Whim, one block at a time. I'll see you then. Oh my gosh, friends, I almost forgot. I left you with Sharpie on your ruler, and I forgot to tell you how to get that out. Whew, okay, super easy tip. No matter how long you have had Sharpie on your ruler, whether it's been years, months, 5 minutes like us, hand sanitizer. I want you to just take a tiny little drop and put it on a napkin or a tissue or a piece of fabric, whatever you have handy. And look, it just comes right off. It doesn't disturb the lines on your ruler, and it just wipes right off. If it's been on your ruler for a little bit longer, a couple of years, I pulled some out of my studio when I recently learned this, and that have been on there for years and years and years, and I just, a little bit of extra elbow grease, but it works beautifully. It does not affect the lines on your ruler, and it just simply removes that Sharpie, so you can mark up your rulers with peace and calm, and no worry that you're going to leave a lasting mark on your ruler, but you're going to be able to use it as much as you need to be able to mark your ruler up if you want to make a little fussy cut. So anyway, I hope that helps. I didn't want to leave you hanging there, and I'll see you next time.